Chapter 18. The sun had just risen when the entire Wang family residence was in a state of slumber. Wang Chong discreetly opened a gap and slipped out of his room. "Hold it right there." Just as he was about to slip out, he heard a bellow from above him. "Young Master Chong, Madam has ordered that you are forbidden from leaving for the next few days. Before Old Master returns, it is best for young Master to remain in his room. Please don't make things difficult for us." Outside the door, two godlike figures stood before Wang Chong, blocking even the rising sun above his head. Lifting his head, Wang Chong immediately saw two familiar figures. With a cold expression, they stood guard outside the door with a stern expression. With a single look, anyone could tell that these two were loyal and impartial. They wouldn't show the slightest bit of leniency. "Guard Shin. Guard Meng." Wang Chong called out the names of the duo. The two godlike figures outside the door were Xianxia and Meng Long. Yesterday, when the two siblings returned from causing trouble, his little sister was grounded for 3 days. On the other hand, Xianxia and Meng Long were sent to stand guard outside Wang Chong's room. Wang Chong learned of this on that very night. "Young Master Chong, there's no need to speak anymore. This is Madam's order. Please don't make things difficult for us," the two of them said coldly. Before Wang Chong could speak, they had already cut off all of his excuses. As they spoke, the two of them didn't even glance at Wang Chong. In the Wang family, Xianxia and Meng Long weren't the only two guards. However, Wang Chong knew that these two held the highest standing in the family. The two of them were loyal to the Wang family. Other than his father and mother, no one else could order them around. His little sister was grounded and his mother had sent Xianxia and Meng Long to his door. Clearly, it was to keep an eye on him and prevent him from causing trouble like the previous time. If it was any other time, Wang Chong wouldn't mind staying at home for a few more days until his father returned. But time waits for no man. Calculating the time, the two Cindy monks would only be able to stay for another 15 days at most before returning. If he could not find them within this period of time and obtain the Wuxia steel from them, then the Tang dynasty would never be able to obtain such a treasure. "Guard Shin, Guard Meng." Wang Chong smiled and called out their names. Although the two people sent by his mother were very difficult to deal with, Wang Chong was confident that he could persuade them. "I know you are loyal, so I won't make things difficult for you. If you don't want me to go out, I can stay. But have you ever thought about it? Mother can imprison me for a while, but can she imprison me forever? Sooner or later, I will go out. Don't tell me that it doesn't matter if I get into trouble at that time." Ugh. With just a single sentence from Wang Chong, the two loyal guards who had prepared themselves mentally to reject Wang Chong were dumbfounded. The two of them stared at Wang Chong in bewilderment. Their mouths opened a few times, but they were unable to say a single word. Madam had said that young Master Chong must not be allowed to leave the house. Instinctively, the two of them thought that it would suffice as long as they followed her instructions. But at this moment, upon hearing Wang Chong's words, the two of them felt that something was amiss. Indeed, if young Master Chong were to get into trouble after the old master returns, would it really be unrelated to them? Wouldn't that be shirking responsibility in order to distance himself from them? It was one thing if it was anyone else, but Xianxia and Meng Long were loyal to the Wang family. It was precisely because of this that they felt uneasy after hearing Wang Chong's words. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that Wang Chong's words might be true. In an instant, they couldn't help but feel anxious. "I'm ashamed." Seeing the faces of the two reddening, Wang Chong apologized in his heart. The two of them were the most loyal guards of the Wang family. Wang Chong didn't wish for this to happen, but in order to obtain the Wuxia steel, as well as this opportunity for the Tang dynasty, he had no choice but to do so. "Guards, there's no need to worry. I'm just saying it casually. I'm a descendant of the Wang family, and the Wang family is my home. Why would I harm him?" Wang Chong's tone softened and he changed his words to dispel the doubts of the two. Xianxia and Meng Long heaved a long sigh of relief. Even the two of them didn't realize that with just a few words from Wang Chong, their mentality had changed drastically. At the very beginning, the two of them were absolutely ignorant and stone-faced. But now, they had unknowingly started to follow Wang Chong's train of thought. Indeed, Young Master Chong is a descendant of the Wang family, so how could he harm the Wang family? Even though the two of them didn't say anything, they were nodding their heads in agreement. I know that Mother must have sent you two here because I got into trouble outside. But I believe that you two should know that I wasn't the one at fault for last night's incident. That Yao Feng harbored malicious intentions and made use of Ma Zhou to harm me. He even said that I was the one who abducted a lady. It's one thing for me to be punished at home, but he even implicated the Wang family in this matter. Do you think that I can tolerate this? Tell me, do you think that the descendants of our Wang family would fear him? Wang Chong said earnestly. Young Master Chong is right. If not for Madam's orders, we would have gone to teach him a lesson as well. That Yao clan has gone too far. I knew that even though young Master is mischievous, he wouldn't stoop to such an extent. Shen Hai and Meng Long said indignantly. From the start, the two of them had wronged Wang Chong. They thought that Wang Chong and Ma Zhou had really committed those atrocities together. But it was precisely because of this that they felt even more ashamed now that the truth was out. On one hand, Wang Chong was touched, on the other hand, he was delighted. He knew that he was about to convince the two of them. I'm just a step away. Wang Chong clenched his fists tightly and added in the final piece of news, Guard Shen and Guard Meng, it's my character that if I want to do something, I will definitely do it. Even if I was grounded back then, I would still return after that. I don't know if you two have ever thought of this, but other than keeping an eye on me and preventing me from leaving, there is actually another way. That is to follow me out. Even so, there are some things that I have to do. Why don't you follow me? Wherever I go, you two will follow me. This way, if you realize that my actions are harmful to the Wang family, you can stop me in time. Isn't this much better than blindly stopping me? Shen Hai and Meng Long were taken aback. The two of them stared at one another speechlessly. Initially, the two of them thought that it would suffice as long as they kept an eye on Wang Chong and prevent him from causing trouble. However, the two of them suddenly realized that what Wang Chong said made more sense. Furthermore, the two of them couldn't find any reason to object to it. Just like what Wang Chong said, it's better to disperse than to block. When Madam and Old Master were angry, they might lock him up for 3 days, 5 days, or even longer, but he would eventually have to come out. When the time comes, he would still cause trouble. If it was any other guard, so be it. In any case, it had nothing to do with them. However, Shen Hai and Meng Long were different. The two of them were loyal to the Wang family and they didn't wish for such a situation to occur. Young Master Chong, we won't object to you going out. However, we have already made it clear that wherever you go, we will follow you. Even if you have to go to the toilet, we will follow you. Young Master Chong should know that we are boorish people. If young Master Chong were to cause trouble outside and cause trouble for Old Master and Madam, don't blame us for being merciless. After contemplating for a long moment, the two of them finally came to a decision. Don't worry. My cultivation realm isn't comparable to yours. If such a matter were to really happen, don't you know what to do? Wang Chong chuckled. Even Shen Hai and Meng Long didn't realize that with just a few words from Wang Chong, their attitude had taken a 180-degree turn. Yet, the two of them didn't think that there was anything wrong with it. If it was before today, the two of them would have never thought that something like this would happen. Bringing along Shen Hai and Meng Long, the two powerful guards, Wang Chong left the Wang residence and headed for the west of the city. Not long after the three of them left, a guard hurriedly barged into the Wang family's inner residence. Madam, young Master Chong ran out? Hearing those words, Madam Wang was shocked. Her body jolted and she abruptly sat up. She asked anxiously, where are Shen Hai and Meng Long? Why didn't they stop him? Shen Hai and Meng Long were loyal to the Wang family and it was impossible for them to betray her orders. This was also the reason why Madam Wang sent them to watch over Wang Chong. With them around, even if Wang Chong were to run out, they would be able to chase him back. However, what happened next left her even more shocked. Madam, they ran out together with young Master Chong. The guard reported honestly. What? Hearing this news, Madam Wang was so shocked that the teacup in her hand fell to the ground. This was even more shocking than Wang Chong sneaking out. How is this possible? He rushed to the white agate jewelry shop in the west of the city and successfully obtained the whereabouts of the 2 Sindhi monks from the western region's Zhaowu merchants. Without stopping, he rushed over as fast as he could. On the bustling Xianxia street, Wang Chong finally saw the 2 Sindhi monks. The 2 of them were dressed in brown robes and their right shoulders were exposed, revealing their dark chests and arms. Different from what Wang Chong remembered, the 2 Sindhi monks weren't completely bald. Instead, they had a layer of coarse black hair. The 2 of them walked slowly. Amidst the bustling crowd, they didn't stand out. "I've finally found them." Looking at the 2 Sindhi Buddhist monks outside the window, Wang Chong heaved a long sigh of relief. He felt as though he had found a treasure. In this era, there weren't many who knew of Sin. However, Wang Chong knew that in another time-space continuum, it had an even more resounding name, India. "Young Master Chong, are they the people you are looking for?" In the carriage, Shanhai and Meng Long were also observing the 2 monks through the window. Ever since they left the residence with Wang Chong, the 2 of them had been on tenterhooks, afraid that Wang Chong would meet some shady friends and bring trouble to the Wang clan. However, upon seeing how Wang Chong went through a huge group of people just to find the 2 Sindhi Buddhist monks, the 2 of them heaved a long sigh of relief. However, even as they felt relieved, curiosity welled up in their hearts. If Wang Chong were to look for Ma Zhou, Li Zhou, Yao Gongzi or Li Gongzi, the 2 of them wouldn't find it strange at all. However, 2 Buddhist monks? This was way too bizarre. For the first time, Shanhai and Meng Long were curious about what their young master was doing outside. Don't underestimate them. Wang Chong knew what the 2 of them were thinking and he couldn't help but chuckle. In the Tang dynasty, monks were one of the most inconspicuous people. However, Wang Chong knew that the 2 of them weren't ordinary monks. Don't be fooled by their blackness. In a few years, who knows how many people in the capital will regret missing out on these 2. Shanhai and Meng Long glanced at one another and their curiosity deepened. Wang Chong chuckled, not bothering to explain further. On the street, the 2 Sindhi monks were using their own methods to sell Wuxia steel ores. Wang Chong realized that they weren't randomly looking for people to sell their Wuxia steel ores to. Instead, they were looking for those who were dressed lavishly and seemed to be wealthy merchants. It's no wonder why they weren't able to sell their ores. Chapter 19. It wouldn't be a problem for the duo to do something like this in the Abbasid Caliphate, Carax Spazinu, or Damascus. That was because as long as it was a profitable business, the Abbasid merchants would do anything. Jewelry, spices, silk, tea leaves, porcelain, ores. As long as they could think of something profitable, they would dabble in it without any reservations. Even human trafficking was a part of the Abbasid Caliphate. However, this was the Tang dynasty, and not everyone was interested in the ore and smelting business. The duo had chosen the wrong target for their actions. Not to mention, how many people in the capital knew Sanskrit? Even if they had chosen the right target for their ramblings, the other party might not be able to understand their intentions. There was no question that their actions were a loss to them, but also a loss to the Great Tang. Perhaps, they didn't harbor much hope for this trip from the very start. Perhaps, they were already prepared to return empty-handed. I have to change everything. A glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes as he walked out of the carriage. Shanhai and Meng Long followed closely behind him. Greetings to the 2 masters. Wang Chong strode over, stood behind the 2, and respectfully bowed. Hearing the commotion behind them, the 2 Sindhi Buddhist monks turned their heads around. However, when they saw that it was only a teenager, both of them revealed a disappointed look. Bolo Savudo, one of the monks, had a grim expression and repeatedly waved his hand at Wang Chong, indicating that he should leave. They were rejected. Shanhai and Meng Long glanced at one another, and they could see the smile in the other's eyes. From the moment they were in the carriage, they could tell that the 2 Sindhi monks had their own rules. Even though they were looking for people and there were quite a number of people looking for them at the same time, most of them would be rejected by them after asking a few questions. Without a doubt, their young master was among those who were rejected as well. The 2 of them were filled with curiosity toward this trip. But from the looks of it now, They had overestimated him. Their young master was still their young master, and he hadn't changed at all. So young master didn't come to an agreement with the other party. It's not that he didn't come to an agreement, but he probably didn't even come into contact with them. Young master probably didn't expect to be rejected. The two of them laughed softly. But in the next moment, something shocking happened. Why are you in such a hurry to reject me? Although I'm young, I'm the most suitable candidate to purchase your Wuxia steel. Wang Chang's tone suddenly changed. With a smile, he spoke in a language that Shanhai and Menglong had never heard before. Sanskrit. Shanhai and Menglong were stunned. The syllables and rhythm of Wang Chang's words were exactly the same as the two Buddhists. Their young master actually knew Sanskrit. How was this possible? Disbelief was written all over their faces. They simply could not believe their ears. Not only was his young master's Sanskrit not rusty, but he was also quite fluent. It looked as if he had been learning for decades. But the question was, how did young master learn it? The two of them had stayed in the Wang mansion for more than 10 years, but they had never seen Wang Chong take on a Sanskrit teacher. No Sanskrit teacher had ever paid a visit to the Wang family residence. Where did her young master learn to speak Sanskrit so fluently? You know Sanskrit? The two Sindhi monks were even more astonished than Shanhai and Menglong. This was especially so for the foreign monk who had ignored Wang Chong and turned his head away. They had been in the Central Plains for a few months now, but this was the first Han they met who could speak Sanskrit in the Tang dynasty. Furthermore, it was an unassuming child who seemed to be in his teens. This made the two of them feel a sense of closeness toward the child before them. Heh, can't a child know Sanskrit? Wang Chong asked calmly. He learned Sanskrit 30 years later in his previous life. At that time, although there were many people like him who knew Sanskrit, it was not rare. But at this moment, he knew that he was probably one of the few people in the capital who knew how to speak Sanskrit. I won't hide it from you. I am a descendant of Duke Jiao of the Tang dynasty. Based on your words, I am equivalent to the Kshatriya of Sindh. In the Central Plains, there aren't many people who are interested in Wuxia steel and are able to afford it. I am definitely one of them. Wang Chong looked at the two Buddhist monks as he spoke. As he spoke, he took out a token, flashed it, and kept it. Do you see the two people at the back? They are the guards of my residence. Now, you should believe me, right? The two Sindhi Buddhist monks stared at Wang Chong in astonishment. To think that this child would know of the existence of the Kshatriya of Sindh despite his young age. But soon, their faces darkened. Wuxia steel? I'm afraid that you are mistaken. We aren't selling Wuxia steel, but Hyderabad ores. Furthermore, the reason why we traveled so far to the Central Plains is to find a customer who is willing to buy our ores. Or perhaps a long-term business partner. Even if you can speak our Sanskrit, we won't agree to your request easily. The two of them said grimly. Wang Chang's face was filled with astonishment. This reply was out of his expectations. But what Wang Chong was more concerned about was another matter. Hyderabad ores. What you are selling isn't Wuxia steel but ores. The two Buddhist monks nodded their heads seriously. Wang Chong was dumbfounded. This joke had gone too far. He thought that the two of them were selling finished Wuxia steel. He didn't think that they would be selling raw ores. But thinking about it carefully, the Hyderabad ores had only just appeared on the market. The name, Wuxia steel, would probably only appear in the world a few years later. In a moment of carelessness, he actually mentioned the name that would only appear in the world a few years later. Gongzi, the name Wuxia, doesn't seem to be from the Central Plains. This humble monk is knowledgeable and has been to many places, but I have never heard of this steel. May I know where Gongzi heard of it? The first Buddhist monk frowned and asked doubtfully. I heard that Sindh's Hyderabad produced an incredible Wuxia steel. I thought that you were selling Wuxia steel. Of course, Wang Chong couldn't say that he heard of it in his previous life. Thus, he casually replied. Oh. The two Buddhist monks were surprised. In the end, Wang Chong actually called Hyderabad ores as Wuxia steel. Sindh only has Hyderabad ores, there isn't any Wuxia steel. Gongzi is probably mistaken. However, the name Wuxia steel is rather pleasant to the ears. If Gongzi doesn't mind, we hope to spread this name. Perhaps, Wuxia steel can become the official name of Hyderabad ores. I don't mind. Wang Chong hurriedly waved his hands. However, a strange feeling welled up in his heart. In his previous life, Wang Chong had long forgotten how the name Wuxia steel came to be. But from the looks of it now, he was about to become the official name of this precious steel. This made Wang Chong feel as though he was personally making history. Thank you. On the other side, upon hearing Wang Chong's reply, the two Buddhist monks smiled. Their impression of this teenager instantly improved. Masters, before we talk business, may I first take a look at the Hyderabad ores in your hands? Wang Chong suddenly asked with a smile. Of course. Upon hearing Wang Chong's request, the two Buddhist monks didn't hesitate and readily agreed. It was reasonable for them to take a look at the goods before talking business. One of the monks raised his hand and soon, a black, ugly, and dirty metal bucket appeared in his hand. So it's here. Wang Chong was shocked. He had already noticed that the two monks were carrying a strange, black, and dirty metal bucket. It was obvious that it wasn't made in Middle-earth. However, Wang Chong didn't expect them to hide the Hyderabad ores inside. Here you go. Sure enough, the monk reached his right hand inside and quickly took out a black, mottled and uneven ores. He then handed it to Wang Chong. Looking at the Hyderabad ores in front of him, Wang Chong's heart suddenly started thumping. The Hyderabad ores. He had finally seen such a legendary ores. I've finally seen it. Wang Chong stared at the ores and his heart was in turmoil. Compared to its illustrious reputation in the future, the current Hyderabad ores were still unknown and unknown. Wang Chong was willing to bet that even these two Buddhist monks might not know the true significance of the Hyderabad ores in his hands. Xianxia Street was bustling with people. Countless wealthy merchants passed by him, but not a single one of them glanced in his direction. Wang Chong was well aware that if he hadn't appeared, the Tang dynasty would have missed out on the precious Hyderabad ores. Who? Wang Chong extended his hand and calmly took the Hyderabad ores from the two Sindhi Buddhist monks. So heavy! This was Wang Chong's first thought. The Hyderabad ores were much heavier than they looked. Wang Chong estimated that they weighed at least 40 to 50 jin. Even with Wang Chong's strength, it was still extremely strenuous. These two monks are very strong. Wang Chong couldn't help but glance at the two Buddhist monks. Previously, he had only noticed the Hyderabad ores on them, but he hadn't noticed their strength. For these two Buddhist monks to be able to carry the Hyderabad ores on them as if nothing had happened, it was clear that they possessed extraordinary strength. Wang Chong didn't pay too much attention to them. Instead, he quickly focused his attention on the ores in his hands. The Hyderabad ores that would shake the world in the future were now dark, mottled, and unremarkable. One could even say that they were somewhat ugly. Just from its appearance, Wang Chong couldn't tell how different it was from other ores. From this point, it was no wonder that the Hyderabad ores were a pearl of the Tang dynasty. Despite the many scholars and geniuses of the Tang dynasty, not a single one of them was able to sense its value. But Wang Chong knew that the significance of this ores was incomparable to any other ores in the world. This was the sharpest and most perfect material for weapons in the world. The ores in the Hyderabad mountain range were only recently discovered by us. Its weight is at least 3 to 4 times that of other ores, making it extremely valuable. Just from this point alone, it is one of the best ores. The solemn voices of the two Sindhi monks sounded. Even though it's an ore, its iron content is extremely high. You don't need to go through any complicated procedures to extract what you need from it. If you need that kind of high-quality iron, then the Hyderabad ores will be even higher than your expectations. Also, Hyderabad ores are extremely sharp. We once tried to create a saber, and it didn't require too much polishing to be extremely sharp. Furthermore, it could easily cut through other sabers. This is an extremely good material for weapons. This is the first batch of ores from the Hyderabad mountain range. The higher the price, the more you buy, the more you will win our respect. You will be the most suitable partner for us to work with. The two Sindhi monks explained by the side. Hearing such a simple explanation, Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Based on such a straightforward explanation, it was no wonder that the two of them returned empty-handed. The Hyderabad ores weren't able to sell well in the Central Plains either. In comparison, the explanations of the later generations were much shorter, but they were also much more beautiful and impactful. The world's most beautiful weapon, the sharpest weapon, the nightmare of the battlefield with the most destructive power. Chapter 20. How much are you selling your Hyderabad ores? Wang Chong raised his head and asked. We don't just sell the ores. Firstly, we don't accept 5 baht coins, copper coins, or silver. The silver of the Central Plains doesn't circulate in our Sindh. However, we can accept gold and jewels. The two monks said. Wang Chong nodded. This was the same as the Hu merchants of the western regions, so he wasn't surprised. In addition, we don't accept individual items. If Gongzi is just looking for novelty and wants to buy a few to play with or buy in small quantities, please forgive us for not accepting it. Gongzi should leave as soon as possible. The two monks said with a stern expression. The two of them had traveled tens of thousands of li to the Central Plains not to sell a few silver ingots and earn some money, but to find a big customer. This was the mission that they shouldered. Lastly, if we are to come to an agreement, at least half of the money must be paid in rations. This is the most important condition of our transaction. Only if you can do this will we view you as a true business partner. Furthermore, you and your clan will receive the respect and gratitude of all Sindhi. Our Hyderabad will also provide you with an endless supply of goods. The two Sindhi Buddhist monks said with a serious expression. Wang Chong exclaimed in surprise. He could understand why they didn't accept 5 baht coins, copper coins, and silver, but to demand that at least half of the money be paid in rations, this truly took Wang Chong by surprise. Who in the world would use rations as a substitute for a transaction? Wang Chong initially thought that the two monks were joking, but upon seeing their serious expressions, Wang Chong knew that they were serious. How could this be? Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. This could be said to be the strangest transaction he had ever heard. However, looking at the gazes of the duo, Wang Chong's heart jolted. Deep in his mind, he recalled some memories from his previous life that he had forgotten. Sindh was different from the Central Plains. Sindh had a large population, but it wasn't as prosperous as the Central Plains. Based on Wang Chong's understanding, Sindh spent most of its time in extreme poverty, war, darkness, and chaos. This also explained why Sindhu, despite possessing such a precious strategic resource like Hyderabad, had never used it for themselves and instead sold it all over the world. They needed food, a lot of it. In truth, if they could, they probably hoped to exchange all of it for rations and bring it back to Sindh. Thinking of this, Wang Chong's mind gradually became clear. Based on his memories, Sindh should be in the midst of a riot. These two monks had come from Sindhu, and they bore a heavy responsibility. It was no wonder that they were not interested in small transactions. But this is not easy. Wang Chong's brow creased as he thought of something. As long as one had money, in theory, one could buy anything in the Tang dynasty. But the problem was that the Tang dynasty implemented grain control. It was very difficult to sell a single grain of rice or even a single grain of millet abroad. Food is the most important thing to the people. In reality, it wasn't just the Tang dynasty. Every dynasty before that had implemented strict grain control. These two Buddhist monks wanted to use half of the grain as a loan. This was equivalent to giving Wang Chong a difficult problem. Privately selling grain outside the country was equivalent to death. Just based on this condition, no one in the entire Tang dynasty would be able to satisfy these two Buddhist monks. Only then did Wang Chong realize that there was a reason why the Tang dynasty missed out on a strategic resource like Wuxia steel in his previous life. The conditions of these two Buddhist monks weren't something that anyone could easily satisfy. Wang Chong felt deeply troubled. But it was impossible for him to give up on Wuxia steel just like that. Am I just going to let those Arabs benefit from it? Wang Chong inwardly frowned. He knew that in the future, Arabia would become a thorn in the side of the Tang dynasty. If these people and a large amount of Hyderabad ore were to be given to them, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. More importantly, Wang Chong knew that this wasn't his imagination. It was a reality that had already happened in his previous life. If he could obtain a large amount of Hyderabad ore, not only would he be able to benefit from it, he would also be able to weaken the opponents of the Tang dynasty. No, the Arabs don't eat rice. Wang Chong suddenly thought of something. The Arabs didn't eat rice. What they ate was a type of large date palm. Further north, the grasslands of the Turkic Khaganate didn't grow any grain. But the monks of Hyderabad also sold their ores in these two places. Clearly, the grain that the Sindhi people understood was very different from the grain that the people of the Central Plains understood. One must know that Sindhu was currently in a state of famine. As long as it was food, why would they care so much about it? It was clear that if they didn't pay attention to this point, the negotiations might fall apart due to the Tang dynasty's grain control strategy. At this point, Wang Chong suddenly became excited. Masters, how about apples, plows, and the like? Wang Chong suddenly asked. The two Buddhist monks were flabbergasted. However, he nodded slowly. They had investigated and found that the rice that the people of the Central Plains ate was very suitable for the Sindhi. If they could transport a large amount of this grain to Sindhu, that would be for the best. But if they couldn't, it would be the same even if they traded it for other food. After all, Sindhu was currently in a state of famine. Then what about bananas, millet, and sorghum? Wang Chong asked excitedly. That's fine too. The two Buddhist monks glanced at each other and nodded. As long as it was food, why would they care so much about it? Haha, then what about cows, sheep, and camels? Wang Chong laughed heartily as he thought further into the future. Even though the Tang dynasty controlled grain, the cows and sheep on the plains weren't. In the territory of the Turks, there were large tracts of these livestock. If the Buddhist monks wanted a large amount of grain, they could bypass the Tang dynasty's policy and borrow the Turks to satisfy their needs. This was a very good way to change the situation. If there are cows and sheep, that would be even better. The two Buddhist monks said. Compared to apples and plows, which were hard to collect, grain, like cows and sheep, were much more popular. As long as it could resolve the famine in Sindhu, they didn't really care what it was. If Gongzi and the clan behind you are willing to accept this, we can continue our negotiations. The two Buddhist monks looked at Wang Chong with much more interest than before. What about the price? Wang Chong smiled. After coming to an agreement, the atmosphere between the two became much more relaxed. According to the price of your Central Plains, the Hyderabad ore is around 300 gold taels per June. The two said sincerely. 300 gold taels? Looking at the duo, Wang Chong was astonished. But you find it expensive? Seeing Wang Chong's expression, the faces of the two Sindhi monks darkened. 300 gold taels is our lowest price. We won't lower it. I thought that we could come to an agreement. If you can't accept this price, we can't work together anymore. It seems like you and your clan aren't our true partners. The attitude of the two Sindhi monks became much colder, a complete 180 degrees change from before. The price of 300 gold taels per June was the most suitable price they came up with after gathering together. The high priest had clearly stated that if the price was lower than this, they wouldn't be able to make a deal. The Hyderabad ore was different from ordinary iron ores, so it couldn't be sold at the price of ordinary iron ores. Before coming to the Central Plains, they had been to many other places and met many people. Among them, there were those who could speak Sanskrit fluently like Wang Chong. Back then, when they heard the price, they had the same reaction as Wang Chong. If they couldn't understand the true price of the Hyderabad ore like them, then it would be impossible for them to continue with the deal. Looks like the Central Plains isn't a suitable place for the Hyderabad ore. The two said coldly before turning around to leave. After spending a few months in the Tang dynasty, they had already determined that this place wasn't suitable for the Hyderabad ore. Based on their plan, they would return to Sindhu in a few days. When they first met Wang Chong, they thought that things would be different. But to think that the outcome would be the same. Wang Chang's reaction only made them even more certain of their initial judgment. The Central Plains was indeed not suitable for the Hyderabad ore. Wait a moment. Masters, you have misunderstood me. Seeing the two Buddhist monks turn around to leave, Wang Chong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He hurriedly beckoned for them to stop. Indeed, the price of the Hyderabad ore was indeed expensive, and it wasn't just an ordinary price, it was extremely expensive. If 300 gold taels were to be used to purchase other ores, he could probably buy dozens of carriages. To purchase ores at this price was definitely extravagant. However, with the memories of his previous life, Wang Chong knew that the price of the Hyderabad ore would reach tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of gold taels per June. Furthermore, it would be impossible to buy it even if one wanted to. What the two Buddhist monks didn't know was that it wasn't that Wang Chong found it expensive. On the contrary, Wang Chong was shocked by its low price. Compared to the astronomical prices of his previous life, the price of the Hyderabad ore was as cheap as cabbage. Wang Chong didn't expect the ore to be so cheap at the start. Of course, Wang Chong wouldn't be so foolish as to say it out loud. Masters, I can accept the price of 300 gold taels per June. Wang Chong said simply. Hearing those words, the expressions of the two Buddhist monks calmed down and they stopped. Even though 300 gold taels per June isn't cheap, the June of our Sindhu is different from the June of your Central Plains. In the Central Plains, your June is only 30 jin, but the June of our Sindhu is Great June. A June is 25 jin. It is much larger than the June of your Central Plains. The Hyderabad ore in your hands is a June. One of the Buddhist monks said, as though trying to make Wang Chong feel better. Wang Chong smiled. Of course, he knew the difference between Sindhu and the Central Plains. However, the two Sindhu Buddhist monks were wrong on one point. A June of the Central Plains didn't even have 30 jin. At most, it was 25 to 26 jin. From this point, it could be said that the Sindhis were extremely honest. Furthermore, 50 jin of the ore was 300 gold taels. In other words, 1 jin was only 6 gold taels. Honestly speaking, this was really the price of a cabbage. He had really arrived at the peak of the market for Hyderabad ores. There's no problem with the price. Now, we can talk about business. Wang Chong said. After satisfying the conditions of the Sindhu Buddhist monks, it was time for him to move on. As long as you can accept our conditions, everything else isn't a problem. How many june of ore do you want? The two Buddhist monks said. Oh no. Masters, you have misunderstood. Wang Chong stretched out a finger and shook it with a smile. I have come to talk to you with great sincerity. However, there is one thing you are mistaken about. What I want is not how many june of ores, not 1 june, not 2 june, not 100 june, not 1,000 june. What I want is to purchase the distribution rights of Hyderabad in the Central Plains, and even the entire Eastern world. Wang Chong threw out his conditions. What was the point of a single transaction? What was the point of buying 1 june, 2 june, or even 100 or 1,000 june of Hyderabad ore? Just a single batch of Hyderabad ore wasn't enough to form a powerful fighting force, nor was it able to increase the strength of the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong's ambitions were much greater. Chapter 21. No one knew better than Wang Chong just how intense the competition for the Hyderabad ores would be in the future. Tens of thousands for a june, hundreds of thousands for a june, and even higher prices were the result of intense competition. Not only in the east, even in the west, in the Abbasid Caliphate to the west of Sindhu, and even further away, the competition for the Hyderabad ores had reached an astonishing level. The prices there weren't any cheaper than the Tang dynasty. This was the reason why in his previous life, even though a Wuxia steel weapon was sold for hundreds of thousands of gold taels, the Tang dynasty was still unable to obtain the Hyderabad ores. This was because in the west, the Abbasid Caliphate was even more expensive than the Tang dynasty. There was a limit to the Hyderabad ores. By the time everyone realized this, the price of the Hyderabad ores would skyrocket. But now, this was just the beginning. Even the Sindhi monks only viewed this ore as an excellent material for weapons. 300 gold taels for a june. This was an extremely rare opportunity for the Tang dynasty. No matter what, Wang Chong had to maximize the benefits for himself and the Tang dynasty. The distribution rights were the best way to solve this problem. Distribution rights? What is that? The two Sindhi monks stared at one another in bewilderment. They had been to many places and were knowledgeable. They had spent quite some time in the Tang dynasty, but this was the first time they had heard of the distribution rights. The distribution rights means that you will hand over the rights to sell the Hyderabad ores in the Central Plains and the entire Eastern world to me. And I will pay you a fixed sum of money. You don't need to sell any ores for this sum of money, and you'll be able to get a fixed sum of money from me every year. Of course, once you sell this right to me, from then on, you won't be able to sell it to anyone else. In fact, you won't even be able to send your men to sell the Hyderabad ores here. However, correspondingly, as the price for exercising this right, I guarantee that I will purchase a certain amount of Hyderabad ores from you every year. This will also guarantee your profits. Wang Chong smiled. In the world he transmigrated from, the general agency was a very common concept. Like what? General Agent of Greater East Asia, General Agent of China, General Agent of Central China. There were many more levels below, and they were all things that ordinary people were familiar with. This kind of thing was used in the automobile industry. The top was the general agent, and below that, the regional distributors were the so-called 4S stores. Although this was something that ordinary people were familiar with in another world, in this world, it was undoubtedly a refreshing and novel experience. Wang Chong could feel that the two monks were looking at him with curiosity. Obviously, they had never heard of such a thing before. In other words, although we lost the right to send people to sell here at the same time, we can earn more money? Can we understand it that way? The two monks asked tentatively. Absolutely correct. Wang Chong laughed. It was easy to talk to smart people. I understand. The two monks finally caught up with Wang Chong's thoughts. But at the same time, they had more doubts. But in this way, aren't you at a disadvantage? Disadvantage? Hearing the words of the duo, Wang Chong almost burst into laughter. These two monks were too cute. Disadvantage? He would make a deal that was disadvantageous? How was that possible? However, they were not to be blamed. In the world he came from, the sales agency was a common practice used by many businessmen. In order to compete for the agency of a product, many rich businessmen racked their brains and crazily bid for it. If the agency of something like Hyderabad or was placed in the world he came from, it would probably be sold at a sky-high price. But here, in this world, the general sales agency was a very new concept. The two foreign monks did not understand, and they felt that he was at a disadvantage. Not at a disadvantage, not at a disadvantage. If you are still worried, we can sign a contract, and then the Supreme Court of the capital will record it and sign it. This way, even if I want to go back on my word, I can't. What do you think? Wang Chong smiled. The two monks fell silent. The Central Plains was tens of thousands of li away from Sindhu, and they were unfamiliar with the place and language barrier. It was truly difficult to sell the Hyderabad ore here. If someone were to help them sell the Hyderabad ore in the Central Plains, it wasn't impossible for them to sell the exclusive agency of the Central Plains to that person. Furthermore, they would be able to earn a sum of money. However, the Hyderabad ore concerned the countless starving people of Sindh. The two of them shouldered a heavy responsibility, so they had to be careful. An oath to the gods. In Sindhu, once a promise was made, it had to be kept. It was the same even without a contract. The two of them had to consider it carefully. We can sell the exclusive agency of the Hyderabad ore to you, but you have to fulfill a condition of ours. After a moment of silence, the two monks suddenly said, "What condition?" Wang Chong was overjoyed. He thought that he would have to go through many twists and turns before he could agree to it. He didn't expect the two monks to agree so readily. The historical records were insufficient. Wang Chong had expected that the struggle for the exclusive agency of the Hyderabad ore wouldn't be easy, but he didn't expect it to be like this. The two monks didn't even have the authority to do so. However, if you can fulfill a condition of ours, we have a high chance of helping you obtain the exclusive agency from the high priests. The two monks solemnly said, "What condition do you want me to fulfill?" Wang Chong asked. "We brought a total of 300 June of or this time. If you can sell all of this Hyderabad or within a month and prove your ability to us, we can sell you the exclusive agency of the Hyderabad or in the Central Plains, or even the entire East." The first Buddhist said seriously, "If you can't do it, then it will be very difficult for us to agree." The other Buddhist added, "This." Wang Chong took in a deep breath and calmed himself down. He knew that changing history wasn't an easy task, and getting the Sindhi to give him the exclusive agency of the Hyderabad or with just a few words was even more difficult. However, Wang Chong didn't expect the difficulty of this matter to be so great. 300 June of or is equivalent to 90,000 gold taels. And it's only for a month. A grim expression appeared in Wang Chong's eyes. He had already realized that this matter wasn't as simple as he had imagined. To the current Wang Chong, 90,000 gold taels was an astronomical sum. Even if he emptied out the entire Wang clan, he still wouldn't be able to gather such a sum. Wang Chong felt that this matter was extremely thorny. A transaction of 90,000 gold taels was something that even 99% of the top magnates of the Tang dynasty wouldn't dare to easily accept. A month's time was too short. Only a genius would be able to do it. 300 June of Hyderabad or isn't a small sum. How did they get so much or? Sindhu is a long distance from the Central Plains, so how did they manage to transport it over? Wang Chong frowned as he felt that this matter was extremely thorny. This number was much larger than he had expected. Wang Chong had originally estimated that they would only have 50 June at most. But now, 300 June. This number was too large. Does this have something to do with the famine in Sindh? Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. Two Buddhist monks had traveled tens of thousands of li to the Tang dynasty, yet they had brought 300 June of rare ore with them. Without a doubt, this was abnormal. It was clear that the famine in Sindh was extremely severe, and they urgently needed a large amount of food. Otherwise, the two monks wouldn't have raised such a strange and nearly impossible request. The 1-month limit was probably related to this as well. This isn't good news. Wang Chong's brow deeply creased. If the problem in Sindh was severe, it meant that the two monks had no other choice. In this aspect, they didn't have much of a choice. Wang Chong had originally wanted to ask if they could reduce this number, but from the looks of it, there wasn't much leeway. "Gongzi, can you do it?" the two Buddhist monks sternly asked. Although the two seemed calm, they were actually even more nervous than Wang Chong. The problem in Sindhu was far more severe than they had expected. In the past few days, they had already received several urging from the Sindhi high priest. If Wang Chong couldn't fulfill their request, their trip to the Central Plains would be a complete failure. "I can." Wang Chong hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. 90,000 gold taels wasn't a small sum, but as long as one worked hard, it wasn't impossible. Moreover, how could one catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's lair? In his previous life, the Tang dynasty had missed out on the Hyderabad or once, and in this life, the Tang dynasty was the closest to success. No matter what price he had to pay, Wang Chong couldn't allow himself, much less the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains, to have this opportunity. If the two venerables have no problems, I hope that we can go to the Court of Judicial Review to file the matter. In this period of time, other than me, I hope that the two venerables will not come to any agreement regarding the Hyderabad or with anyone else. Wang Chong said, Of course. The two monks were overjoyed. Even they didn't think that Wang Chong would agree to such harsh conditions. But they didn't expect Wang Chong to agree in the end. It seems like we have underestimated Gongzi. I didn't think that Gongzi and the clan behind you would be so powerful. If Gongzi and your clan can help us complete this mission, you will become our true partner, and you will receive the respect of all of us Sindhu. The two Buddhist monks said excitedly. Haha, the two venerables are being too polite. Wang Chong laughed heartily. If the two monks were to know of his background, they probably wouldn't think so. Wang Chong had nothing to lose at this moment. After all, the barefooted did not fear those who wore shoes. Young Master Chong, someone seems to be following us. Just when Wang Chong was prepared to bring the two of them to the court of judicial review, Shenhai's low voice suddenly sounded by his ear. Wang Chong's heart jolted, and he abruptly recovered from his daze. Borrowing the opportunity to speak, Wang Chong discreetly tilted his shoulder in the direction of Shenhai's hand signal. In an instant his vision changed drastically. Shenhai and Meng Long were astonished by this move. Where did their young master learn such formidable means? This doesn't seem like something a 15-year-old child is capable of. As such, the two of them were unable to associate Wang Chong with the incompetent young Master Chong in their minds. Wang Chong didn't know the thoughts of the two. From the corner of his eyes, Wang Chong could already see two furtive figures at the corner of the street behind him. It's the men from the Yao residence. Wang Chong's eyelids twitched. Shenhai and Meng Long weren't able to discern their origins, but Wang Chong could tell that they were Yao Feng's guards. Back then, the vast crane pavilion was filled with guards from the Yao residence. During the fight, Yao Feng summoned a huge group of people, and these two were among them. Chapter 22. Those fellows sure have quick reactions. Wang Chong frowned. The reaction of the Yao clan was much faster than he had expected. Those two have been following us ever since we left the house. However, we weren't certain then. But now, we can be certain that they are coming for us. Meng Long whispered into Wang Chong's ears with certainty. Wang Chong remained silent, but his heart was in turmoil. In the vast crane pavilion, he and his little sister had foiled Yao Guangyi's plans. Even though Wang Chong had tried his best to avoid arousing suspicion, Yao Guangyi was a crafty old fox. However, Yao Guangyi was a crafty old fox and he was extremely suspicious of others. Could it be that his actions in the vast crane pavilion had already aroused his suspicions? Was that the reason why he sent Yao Feng to follow him? If that was the case, then the situation was dire. Wang Chong didn't want to attract their attention at this moment. Masters, do you know how to read scriptures? Wang Chong suddenly turned around and asked the two Sindhi monks. Scriptures? The two monks were astonished. They didn't understand why Wang Chong would ask about this. However, they still answered honestly, I know a little about it. You must be joking. If Sindhi monks didn't know how to read scriptures, then there wouldn't be any monk in the world who knew how to read scriptures. Wang Chong's words were equivalent to asking whether a hen could lay eggs. Great, then can I invite the two masters to recite a portion of scriptures for me? Wang Chong clapped his hands and chuckled. The two Buddhist monks were baffled. They couldn't understand why Wang Chong would ask them to recite scriptures at this moment. However, after coming to an agreement regarding the Hyderabad ores, the two of them had a huge matter in mind. Reciting a portion of scriptures for Wang Chong was a small matter. Of course. The two of them agreed readily. The moment they finished speaking, they began to recite a portion of Sanskrit scriptures for Wang Chong. What is that lad doing? You must be joking. He went out early in the morning just to find these two monks to recite scriptures for him? When the sound of Sanskrit chanting echoed from the street ahead, the two Yao residence guards at the corner of the street stared at each other dumbfoundedly, feeling as though they were being played. Wang Chong left early in the morning and acted mysteriously. The two of them thought that he had found some important information. Who would have thought that after so long, they were actually looking for two Buddhist monks to chant scriptures for fun? This was too ridiculous. The two of them were completely unable to understand what was going on in the heads of these good-for-nothings. What did I say? I already said that this kid can't change his ways. Young master thinks too highly of him. What do you think? Am I right? Take a look for yourself. What about this brat is worth us wasting so much energy on? A good early morning has been wasted by this brat. The leader of the Yao residence guards had a belly full of resentment, and when he saw Wang Chong laughing in the distance, he was even more enraged. Well, you can't say that. Old Master and Gongzi must have their own thoughts. The other guard stuttered, his face full of awkwardness. Thoughts? Are you talking about this? In my opinion, Old Master and Gongzi are making a mountain out of a molehill. He's just a child, how much of a storm can he stir up? The leader of the guards scoffed disdainfully. Besides, shouldn't we be following his little sister? Weren't you there at the vast crane pavilion as well? This lad is just a foil. The one who's truly formidable is his little sister. That's the real target we should be following. The other guard opened his mouth and wanted to retort, but he found that he was speechless. He could not say anything to refute at all. He could only say, "You're the Lord of the heavens. Let's wait a little longer. Perhaps we might discover something else." What else is there to wait for? Isn't it enough to waste an entire morning? Are we going to waste another afternoon? You can wait if you want, but I won't be accompanying you. The scar-faced guard said impatiently. The other guard opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he hesitated. Glancing into the distance, he saw that the two Buddhist monks had already finished their chanting. Wang Chong bowed and invited the two Buddhist monks into his carriage, which was heading in the direction of the Wang family residence. From the looks of it, he was intending to invite the two Buddhist monks to his residence to sing. The second guard sighed and dispelled the thought in his mind. Forget it. Gongzi has said that we have to report any news immediately. Let's return to the residence and report the news. After which, the two of them turned around and left silently. Gongzi, they have left. On the carriage, Meng Long lowered the curtain at the back of the carriage and turned to Wang Chong. He observed for a long time and confirmed that the two monks didn't follow them. Good, let's head to the Court of Judicial Review now. Wang Chong smiled as though he had expected it. The horse neighed, and with a flick of its reins, the entire carriage turned around. At a crossroad, it abruptly turned into another path, heading in the direction of the Central Plains Court of Judicial Review. The Court of Judicial Review was the place in charge of all court cases and disputes over contracts. However, the most important function of this place was for the notarization and filing of contracts. Once a contract was notarized here, it would be extremely effective. It was equivalent to the endorsement of the entire Tang dynasty. As such, no matter which party to the contract, they wouldn't dare to violate it easily. To many merchants who were unfamiliar with the other party's background, it was the best choice for them to file their contracts in the Court of Judicial Review. In fact, many merchants from the Abbasid Caliphate, Western regions, Turkic Khaganate, Uzun, and Silla chose to file their contracts in the Court of Judicial Review as soon as they arrived. There were many wealthy merchants in the capital, and Wang Chong was afraid that an undue delay might cause trouble. Thus, he hurriedly dragged the two of them to the Court of Judicial Review. And to the two Sindhi Buddhist monks, the notarization of the Court of Judicial Review was an additional layer of protection. Boo! I finally succeeded. Wang Chong scanned the contract in his hands and walked out of the Court of Judicial Review. He felt much more at ease. Thank you so much, masters. Within a month, I will definitely pay you 300 jun of ores. But at the same time, I hope that you can keep your promise. Wang Chong turned around and said, Of course. By the gods, we Sindhi will never go back on our promises. Beneath a Chinese scholar tree by the side of the path, the two monks had a serious expression on their faces. When they first met, the two of them were a little repulsed by the young man before them. They didn't think that he was a suitable partner for them in the Central Plains. But after this trip, their impression of Wang Chong was completely different. This young man's thought process was completely different from that of an ordinary person. Even now, they were still a little confused about the so-called distribution rights. Furthermore, his identity seemed to be much more noble than they had imagined. The two of them had already sensed this in the Court of Judicial Review. But no matter what, this was good news for the sales of the Hyderabad ores in the Tang dynasty. Masters, let's part ways here. If there's anything, we will contact you again. Wang Chong looked at the two of them and said, The two foreign monks nodded their heads and walked away with widened strides. Seeing the two of them disappear in another direction, Wang Chong slowly retracted his gaze. Now, I have to think of a way to get the 90,000 gold taels. Wang Chong muttered to himself. Even though he managed to obtain the dealership rights for the Hyderabad ores from the two Sindhi monks, the real headache was about to come. 90,000 gold taels wasn't a small sum. Wang Chong only had a monthly allowance of a few silver ingots. If he were to use his monthly allowance to repay the debt, it would be impossible for Wang Chong to gather the sum in his entire life. What a headache. I should return first. Wang Chong patted his head and walked back to his carriage. Rumble, rumble. The rumbling of a carriage sounded. Just as Wang Chong took a few steps, his vision blurred. A bronze carriage suddenly appeared in front of him, right in between him and his carriage. Taken aback, Wang Chong subconsciously raised his head. There was a familiar bronze flower on the carriage that immediately caught his eye. Seeing this bronze flower, Wang Chong felt as though he was slapped in the face and his face paled. Not good. Wang Chong's face darkened. He wanted to turn around and escape, but it was already too late. A white jade-like arm stretched out from the gap of the carriage like a spirit snake. The speed of this arm didn't seem fast, but even with Wang Chong's ability, he was still unable to dodge it. In just an instant, his ear was viciously grabbed. Little brat, you still want to escape after seeing your sister? From the elegant carriage, a haughty voice of a lady sounded gleeful, as though she was extremely proud of herself for grabbing Wang Chong's ear. My dear cousin, stop grabbing, stop grabbing. I won't run anymore, I won't run anymore. Being grabbed by the jade-like fingers, Wang Chong's ear turned red as though it was on fire, causing him to groan in pain. What did you call me? The lady in the carriage harumphed in dissatisfaction. Indistinctly, one could even hear the sound of giggling, as though there was more than one person in the carriage. I was wrong. Second sister, second sister. Seeing that the wind was blowing, Wang Chong quickly changed his words. Without his little sister to protect him, Xianxia and Meng Long were definitely not a match for his second sister. In fact, even if his little sister was here, she wouldn't dare to make a move on his second sister. The biggest possibility was that he would stick to her body with a face full of admiration, calling out, second sister, non-stop. That's more like it. In the carriage, the lady nodded her head in satisfaction. With a flick of her finger, the carriage door opened and Wang Chong felt as though he was a kite being lifted into the carriage. It was as though he had entered another world. Wang Chong's eyes were filled with red. There's no need for the two of you to wait any longer. I'll be bringing that lad Wang Chong. In the blink of an eye, the lady's bossy voice sounded before Xianxia and Meng Long. After which, the carriage rumbled as it continued on its way. Wang Chong calmed himself down and only then did he notice that he had entered another carriage. It was a huge carriage with red and pink hues. It was clearly a womanly carriage. The carpet was red and in front of him, Wang Chong saw a well-endowed and dignified young beauty who looked to be around 24 to 25 years old. Her head was lowered as she trimmed her red nails. Next to her, a graceful woman in red clothes covered her jade-like fingers and giggled as she looked at her. Wang Chong didn't recognize the lady beside him, but he felt awkward being stared at and giggled at. Second sister, you're looking for me? Wang Chong looked at the young beauty who was trimming her nails and braced himself to ask. This person was his cousin. This cousin of his was the kind of person who couldn't help but feel as though she was a big sister to anyone who laid eyes on her, and they couldn't help but want to get close to her. However, Wang Chong wasn't one of them. Unlike others, as long as he saw this big sister, Wang Chong couldn't help but feel fear and have the urge to run away. In this world, there weren't many women who could strike fear into Wang Chong's heart. Yet, this cousin of his was one of them. During the period when Wang Chong was at his most rebellious, even his mother couldn't control him. Yet, before this cousin of his, Wang Chong was like a monkey in the palm of the Buddha, unable to do anything at all. In the Central Plains, when a prestigious clan's authority reached its pinnacle, they would seek to expand their population. This was the same for the Wang clan. Putting aside the siblings born from the same mother, the children of those uncles and aunts were already plenty. Chapter 23. Even though she was a lady, this cousin of his was known to be a woman not inferior to a man. Her martial arts were fearsome. Wang Chong had never been able to last more than 3 moves against her. Since he was unable to defeat her, he could only escape. Yet, this cousin of his was skilled in making friends all over the world. She had countless close friends all over the capital. No matter where Wang Chong ran to, he wouldn't be able to escape the eyes and ears of those close friends of hers. More importantly, Wang Chong still didn't know which lady was buying rouge by the side of the road was his close friend. Worst of all, this cousin of his loved to meddle in other people's business, especially his. Based on what she said, she had always wanted a younger brother at home, but it was a pity that big uncle and big aunt didn't agree to her wishes. Thus, his cousin liked to treat him as his younger brother. In any case, they shared the same surname, Wang, and shared the same grandfather. Furthermore, she didn't like him calling her cousin. Instead, she called her second sister, as though the both of them were born from the same mother. Every time Wang Chong saw her, his head would swell. When Wang Chong was rebellious with his bad friends, he had been stopped by her many times. Along the way, he had been picked up like a monkey, and he had lost all his face. He couldn't defeat her in a fight, nor could he escape from her. Furthermore, she was his cousin, so Wang Chong could only give in obediently. But I can't look for you if there's nothing? Wang Zhuyen lifted her head upon hearing those words, and her gaze was hostile. Upon seeing her threatening gaze, Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly waved his hands. No, there's nothing. However, he was certain that this second sister of his wouldn't visit him without a reason. Since she was waiting for him outside the Court of Judicial Review, she must be looking for him for something. Only then did Wang Zhuyen retract her gaze in satisfaction. She lowered her head and continued trimming her nails silently. Since his cousin wasn't speaking, Wang Chong didn't dare to start a conversation. He sat there obediently, waiting for her to bring it up herself. I heard that you've grown up in the past 2 days. You even went to the vast crane pavilion to teach Yao Feng of the Yao clan a lesson. Wang Zhuyen mocked as she trimmed her nails. Before Wang Chong could answer, a pair of eyes looked over. It was the woman in red next to him. She looked at Wang Chong in surprise, as if she was seeing him for the first time. What are you talking about, second sister? That Yao Feng suffered in the hands of my big brother and second brother, but he was unable to defeat them. Thus, he made use of a hooligan like Ma Zhou to deal with me. I was infuriated as well, so I barged into the vast crane pavilion to look for him. It's just a small conflict, it's nothing much. Wang Chong gritted his teeth and said. His heart was also numb. He knew that yesterday's matter wouldn't end so easily. Although the ones fighting were their juniors, it was the Yao and Wang families that were involved in it. Not to mention that the old man of the Yao clan had actually used this as a pretext to make a fuss, bringing this matter to the imperial court and reporting it to the emperor. In the Tang dynasty, the Yao and Wang clan were towering trees. Their disciples and acquaintances could be found all over the world. This matter had implicated countless prestigious clans, and attracted a lot of attention. A huge uproar had already been stirred up in the royal court. If not for this, Big Uncle wouldn't have been so furious as to come knocking on his door yesterday to denounce him. But Wang Chong knew that this was only the beginning. His cousin Wang Zhuyen had already come personally to stop him and interrogate him for a confession. But Wang Chong knew that this was just a drizzle. In the future, there would only be more people looking for him. A small conflict? You sure know how to talk. Wang Zhuyen lifted her head to look at Wang Chong and sneered coldly, that Yao Feng was beaten black and blue by you, and the old master of the Yao clan even reported our family to the Holy Emperor. Yet you say that it's a small conflict? Is this a small conflict? Second sister, I'm really wronged. Wang Chong cried out indignantly, think about it, how old is Yao Feng and how old am I? With that little bit of martial arts of mine, how could I possibly beat him up? Isn't this a joke? If I really had such an ability, would I have been dragged into the carriage by you, second sister, with just one hand? The red-robed lady by the side nodded her head. She could tell that Wang Chong's martial arts weren't too profound. Putting aside Yao Feng, even the guards of the Yao residence were much stronger than him. Besides, Yao Guangyi is there, and his guards are all over the place. No matter how you put it, whether it's good or bad, isn't it still up to them? Wang Chong continued with an aggrieved expression. In my view, everyone knows that the Yao clan is a schemer. They probably knew that I was heading over and intentionally waited there to frame me. I was just infuriated, so I barged in and flipped Yao Feng's table. Saying that I flattered him, isn't that just making things up? Really? Wang Zhuyan finally lifted her head and stared at Wang Chong. Clearly, she was starting to believe his words. Of course it's true. Second sister, others might not know how capable I am. How can you possibly not know? All I do is carry the birdcage and fight with the dogs every day. Where would I find the time to cultivate? How could I possibly be a match for a martial arts genius like Yao Feng? Wang Chong said. This wasn't entirely wrong. The one who made a move was the Wang family's little sister, and Wang Chong didn't do anything at all. You're right. That Yao Feng has always been an outstanding talent amongst his peers in the capital. Just based on what you've done, it's impossible for you to deal with Yao Feng with that bit of capability of yours. Wang Zhuyan pondered for a moment before nodding her head, acknowledging his words. All right. You've passed this test. The nail brush you gave me previously isn't bad, and it's quite useful. Do you have any other good stuff? Wang Chong looked at the nail file in Wang Zhuyan's hands that he had made for her previously and rolled his eyes. Did his cousin really think that he was Doraemon's pocket that could never be emptied or used up? How long had it been since he made this nail brush? Wasn't she being too greedy? What? Wait a moment. Zhu Yan, you said that this unique nail brush in the capital was invented by cousin? Before Wang Chong could say a word, the red-robed lady seated beside Wang Zhuyan couldn't hold back her curiosity any longer. She stared at Wang Chong in astonishment. That's right. Little hussy, you want to be an old cow eating young grass? Have you taken a fancy to my little brother? Wang Zhuyan said with disdain. Lass, nothing good comes out of a filthy mouth. How am I old? The red-robed lady scolded jokingly. As she spoke, she couldn't help but giggle. Don't give me that. Do you think that I don't know that you've been eyeing the nail brush in my hands the entire time? Forget it, I'll let you have it. Take it. Wang Zhuyan rolled her eyes and with a flick of her wrist, she tossed the nail brush to the red-robed lady. Thank you, Sister Zhuyan, for your reward. The latter chuckled, not minding the matter at all. She snatched the nail brush as though it was a treasure. The nail brush in Wang Zhuyan's hands wasn't a top-notch sword, nor was it able to raise one's cultivation. To a man, it wasn't worth a single coin. However, her sisters had been eyeing it intensely. To think that it would end up in her hands. Thinking of this, the red-robed lady's face lit up and she kept the nail brush tightly in her bosom. Since you know that I've already rewarded you, why aren't you getting off the carriage? Do you want me to reward this little cousin of mine to you as well? Wang Zhuyan said impatiently. That's a good idea. I couldn't ask for more. The red-robed lady chuckled as she glanced at Wang Chong's face seductively. However, she still opened the carriage door and walked out leisurely. She had already arrived at her destination. Wang Zhuyan was just giving her a lift. Second sister, who's that lady? Wang Chong glanced in the direction where the red-robed lady left and he couldn't take it anymore. His second sister's best friends were all hotter and more avant-garde than the last. Before the red-robed lady left, her eyes were filled with reluctance. It was as though she wanted to dig 2 pieces of flesh out of his body. She's the daughter of the Duke of Yu. Why, are you eyeing her? Wang Zhuyan sneered. How can that be? Second sister, I did a pretty good job with my acting, right? Wang Chong chuckled. Wang Zhuyan suddenly fell silent. She stared at Wang Chong for a few seconds before her expression turned cold. Pung! She closed the carriage door and grabbed Wang Chong's ear. She seemed to have become a completely different person. You brat! Do you know how much trouble you have caused? Don't tell me that you appeared in the vast crane pavilion by chance. Don't tell me that you and Yao Feng were together because of Ma Zhou. I don't want to hear that. If I were to find out that you had caused such a huge trouble for your family because of your foolishness, I will break your legs first. Wang Zhuyan stared at Wang Chong with an incomparably cold expression, as though she was looking at a stranger. Despite knowing her for so long, this was the first time Wang Chong saw her so stern and angry. Other than the two of them, there was no one else in the carriage. Wang Chong hesitated for a moment before revealing the truth. Second sister, do you trust me? Wang Chong sat up straight and asked with a serious expression. If I didn't trust you, I wouldn't have brought the daughter of the Duke of Yu here to be your witness and clean up your mess. Wang Zhuyan said coldly. Her expression didn't improve in the slightest. But I'll speak. I intentionally snuck into the vast crane pavilion. I was also the one who instructed my little sister to beat up Yao Feng. Even the meeting between Yao Guangyi and my father was intentionally disrupted by me. Everything was carefully planned by me. Wang Chong said seriously. But Wang Zhuyan was perplexed. She couldn't understand why Wang Chong would do such a thing. The Yao clan harbors ill intentions towards our Wang clan. I can't allow them to succeed. I'm unable to explain this matter in detail, but you will understand after a period of time. Wang Chong said seriously. What? Wang Zhuyan's expression changed and she asked gravely. Are you certain about this? Wang Chong nodded his head seriously. All right. I trust you on this matter. Wang Zhuyan's expression fluctuated, but she didn't pursue the matter any further. You aren't going to ask? Wang Chong was surprised. There's no need for that. Wang Zhuyan smiled and waved her hands. Her expression became much better. You might be a little mischievous, but that's all. We are a family. I believe that no matter what, you won't harm your own family. Second sister, Wang Chong looked at his cousin Wang Zhuyan, and he felt touched. Even though he was mischievous, and even though he had caused a lot of trouble, he had never thought of harming this clan. The only one who could understand this was his cousin, Wang Zhuyan. Even though this cousin of his had stopped him outside many times, she only reprimanded him a little and eventually allowed him to go. This time, the matter with Yao Feng was reported to the Holy Emperor by the old master Yao of the Yao clan. Everyone in the Wang clan was implicated, causing a huge uproar in the capital. But for such an important matter, his cousin didn't ask anything and just trusted him with one sentence. For a moment, Wang Chong didn't know what to say. In the past few days, the clan has been in chaos. Not to mention my father, even eldest aunt, eldest uncle, youngest uncle, and a few of your cousins are all hopping about in a rage. They've been infuriated by you. All I did was stand up for them. Even if I didn't appear, they would still come looking for you. Wang Zhuyan said with a solemn expression, the daughter of the Duke of Yu is skilled in the art of politics. With her in the capital, the matter regarding you will be resolved. This is also the reason why I pulled her over to look for you. As for eldest aunt and eldest uncle, I'll tell them what you've said today. As long as you're certain that the matter between you and Yao Feng isn't a personal grudge, no matter what, I'll find a way to cover it up for you. Second sister, thank you. Wang Chong expressed his gratitude. Cousin Wang Zhuyan had a close relationship with Big Aunt and Uncle. Big Aunt had always thought that cousin Wang Zhuyan was a person of her own will and respected her opinion. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.